Hi again, everyone. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. I write the Illinoize political newsletter that you can read each and every day at theillinoize.com, ILLINOIZE. The Illinois State Fair kicked off this week in Springfield. We'll be down there next week for the political days. Republican Day on Thursday. Governor's Day is Wednesday. We'll have some content for you, hopefully put together a podcast while we're down there next week. So stay tuned for that. On the show this week, independent candidate for governor, Collin Corbett. We sat down at his campaign office earlier this week. Had a long issues-based discussion. More on that in a moment. The story of the week has kind of been the Chicago Bears, which have come back from nowhere in terms of political news in recent days. The Bears held a news conference on Thursday. Word started to get around Wednesday night that there's going to be some major announcement about the Bears Stadium in Hammond. Kind of turned into a big old nothing burger. Said that they were still focused on Hammond, Indiana. It was Bears president and CEO Kevin Warren and Bears owner George McCaskey that were kind of doing their regular preseason media availability. So not a lot of news out of that. Other than to say that, Illinois is not out of the running, but they're still focused on Hammond, Indiana. The governor responded Friday to what the Bears had to say, basically, to mix metaphors, putting the ball in their court.
We were not able, the legislature did not pass everything that they wanted. And so it's up to those who want to get something from the state government to put the votes together on a bill that will pass. And so the question really is, what is it that they're willing to compromise on to make sure that the state government, the legislature, the governor can support it? I've been very clear about what principle number one for me is, which is I'm not going to saddle the taxpayers with building a stadium for a $9 billion valued team and business. That's great that they're successful as a team. I hope they'll be more successful this year. On the field anyway. But we want them to continue to succeed, and we will support them with infrastructure and other things that we support other businesses with as we do residents and others. But they've got to come forward and figure out what it is that will work with the legislature. They have had an occasional conversation with various legislators they think are useful to talk to that they've chosen. That's great. They have talked to my office on occasion to check in with us, to ask questions, so that they can do the work that they need to do. But it is up to the Bears to make sure that they're clear about how they're going to get something working with the legislature. They've hired new lobbyists, and they're working with those lobbyists, and I hope with members of the legislature to push something through.
So that's Governor Pritzker on Friday. You know what he didn't mention in that answer? Was property taxes. And that's been the entire bugaboo of the entire situation here is the Bears want, quote unquote, property tax certainty, AKA a big old property tax break. And that's where they're really in the minutia on these two bills, whether it's the mega projects bill or the stadium authority bill in the Senate, which would literally reduce the Bears property taxes to zero like it is at Soldier Field. So that's still the sticking point. And it was interesting to me that the governor didn't touch it in a pretty long-winded answer about the Bears. All right, let's talk some more about the governor's race. Sat down at the campaign office of independent Colin Corbett this week. Disclosures here, just so I'm fully transparent with you all. I've mentioned before, he and I are friends socially outside of this, and he's still being treated like every other candidate. No questions were cleared with him. No topics were discussed with him. He is treated like every other candidate, and I think you'll find that it was a typical hard-hitting, issue-based interview that you'll find that just as normal as we usually have with candidates, but just wanted to be transparent with you so that you didn't hear anything or have any beliefs that maybe somebody's trying to do PR for someone or something like that. So that's where that stands. I hope you enjoy our conversation with independent candidate for governor, Collin Corbett. Collin Corbett, thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Are you a spoiler in this race?
Am I a spoiler? I wouldn't have put my entire life, reputation, everything I've built in politics for 20 years just to be a spoiler. We're all in on this race, and I've made significant sacrifices. There's no way I would have done that just to be a spoiler in a race.
Darren Bailey was asked about you at a town hall this week, called you a Pritzker plant, said that your business was failing, so you were looking for, I don't know, a golden parachute or something from Pritzker. Have you had any contact with anyone affiliated with Pritzker? What's your response to what he had to say? I mean, you've been a Pritzker critic over the years, but that would also seem like good politics from the guys that spent a lot of money to help boost Bailey in 2022. So is there any connection? Have you had any contact with the Pritzker people?
Have not at all. I've never met J.B. Pritzker, never spoken to him. But it's interesting, this idea of my consulting company was failing. You know, we didn't seem to be failing when the members of our team helped Mike Bost beat Darren Bailey a couple years ago. We didn't seem to be failing when Darren Bailey's running mate hired us multiple times to elect him and the people closest to him. So it's a convenient argument that he makes now, when the truth is, there's no way that J.B. Pritzker would pick me as the guy to put up there. He would have picked somebody that was much more controllable. I've been his toughest critic for years, and everyone has said it, that even before this run, I was J.B. Pritzker's toughest critic. So it's pretty clear which candidate in this race is in here for the right reasons. And as you mentioned, the only candidate in this race who's benefited from J.B. Pritzker's millions is Darren Bailey.
But you can see the interesting dynamic of the guy who ran Republican campaigns, had this Republican-leaning podcast, was critical of J.B. Pritzker, then all of a sudden one day says, I'm not a Republican anymore, and I'm going to go run for governor the next day.
Yeah, I mean, my beliefs have not changed. I've not stopped being critical of J.B. Pritzker. So literally the only thing that changed was I changed my label from R to I. So this idea that somehow I've changed overnight, no, it's not about have I changed? It's about have I realized how broken our political process is? And that's something I've spoken about for years. I tried to fix it from inside the two-party system. Unfortunately, it was clear that's just not possible. And so now I'm trying to fix it from outside the two-party system.
But why do this? I mean, it's a fait accompli that J.B. Pritzker is going to win re-election. He has gigantic sums of money. Darren Bailey's, by all accounts, a pretty weak general election candidate. There's seemingly, you know, we see the polls about this appetite for independents, but independents never do that well. Remember, we saw the Sam McCann debacle in 2018. Nobody's done particularly well since Rich Whitney in 2006, and that was because of the stink of Blagojevich. No independent has won a statewide race since Jesse the Body Ventura in 1998. It just, doesn't it seem a little bit like a fool's errand?
So, first of all, when you say this has been tried before, it hasn't. Illinois has not had an independent candidate for governor at this level. I'm only the third independent to be on the ballot for governor in Illinois in 86 years. So this idea that this has been tried isn't true. And the second thing is, our politics have been moving in this direction since the 2000s. And so you have 47% of Americans now identifying as independent. You can't compare today to the times before. More and more people are recognizing how broken our politics is and how we need an alternative. We're going to learn a lot in November. We're going to find out if this was or was not a fool's errand, but my hope and my belief is that those people who have told me flat out that they're frustrated, that the two parties are not giving them what they want, that candidates just yelling and attacking each other and making personal attacks instead of solving the problems that we face, that's not working for them. I've got faith that they're going to step up and make their voices heard on November 3rd.
Why run as an independent? Why not, if you're talking about starting a movement, why not establish a third party and try and find a real lane so you don't have to get 37,000 signatures to get on the ballot next time around, or whoever else would be running statewide next time around. If this were such a movement, why not try and establish an Abe Lincoln party or whatever it might be?
Yeah, we had a lot of people who proposed that idea, but ultimately this is about I can't talk about how broken the party system is and then go create my own party. That comes across way too much like a used car salesman. To me, I think the problem is actually the parties, and it's not the people in them. This is where there's a lot of really good people on both sides who've been put in this position where they're sniping and fighting and attacking each other. What appeals to me about being independent is being outside of that system entirely. I'm sure down the road people will propose third parties and different ideas, and we'll be open to that conversation. But right now, what we've got to talk about is that the party system itself is what's failing. And you can't do that if you're just simply proposing a replacement for one or both of the political parties.
You're a political guy, right? You've done politics for decades now. I come from journalism, worked in state government, worked in campaigns, do whatever the hell this is now. and I've been around state government for 20 years. And I would admit, not a great grasp on how the executive office in the state works. It's a giant operation. It's with thousands of employees under him. As someone who's never done anything inside of state government, can you honestly go to voters and say, hey, put me in charge of a $56 billion budget?
It's one of those jobs that you don't have experience doing until you're doing it. And there's 50 governors in America. So there's 50 people right now who have that experience and people who have served before. But it's not a job you have experience in going into it. So right now you've got one candidate who has experience in the office, and that's J.B. Pritzker. If that's important to you, then maybe J.B. is going to get your vote. But you have to question, has he done a good job managing all those agencies and managing that gigantic budget? As I hope we'll get into today, he clearly has not. So then you have a choice between two candidates who've not been in that position. I've run multiple small businesses. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets. I've managed campaigns. I've hired people. I've been in positions of leadership. And so I have done, from a business side, I've done a lot that prepares you for that role. And then I've spent 20 years being involved in politics and being involved in government at the local level, the county level, and at the state level. And so I know how government works, how governments interact with each other. I know what people want in this state because I've polled them and I've talked to them for 2 decades. I bring a lot of the pieces you need to do that job, but I'll readily admit nobody has that experience until they're in the job.
We both have a lot of Republican friends, maybe fewer than we used to. But one of the things that I constantly hear from Republicans, party types, partisans at least, is that all he's doing is guaranteeing that J.B. Pritzker wins a third term. That I wish he would get behind Darren Bailey, because even if he's not a Darren Bailey guy, that's the Republican choice. That's the only guy that can beat J.B. Pritzker in November. Why are they wrong?
Because when you look at the primary turnout, less than 23% of voters actually showed up in the primary. And then you drill down to how many people actually voted for Darren Bailey. It was fewer than 4% of the registered voters in Illinois. So what they're saying, if I can translate what you just said, is Collin shouldn't do this and try to represent the other 96% in Illinois. He should just instead sit back and let the 4% dictate Illinois politics and then go lose in November, because that's assured. 701 in a 2-person race, Darren Bailey already has lost. And so it's a ridiculous argument on its face, especially because I'm sick and tired of people who only think about the next 5 minutes. I've got a 2-year-old boy. I've got another baby on the way. We've got to think about the future in Illinois. And these people who are making that argument are people who have lost over and over and over and over and over, and they want to do the same thing again, and then the same thing again. Of course, attack the one person who's actually got the guts to think creatively, step out of that system and say, how do we actually achieve balance in this state? Because right now, with how broken the Republican Party is in this state, and how much they have failed to provide an alternative. When I talk to Democrats, here's the thing they tell me. They want me to succeed. Straight up, I've talked to moderate Democrats, liberal Democrats, uber progressive Democrats, and every single one has said, we hope you succeed, because even we admit that government works better when there's balance, and the Republican Party in the state has failed to provide that balance. And so what we're going to do is bring representation from the middle and anyone else who'd like to join up and try to achieve that balance in Illinois so we could actually start making good policy decisions for the people of the state.
We'll loop back to politics at the end. Let's talk some issues for a few minutes. Affordability is the only thing that matters, and I've kind of gotten into it with both parties over this in recent months. That one, on the federal level, you've got Donald Trump's tariffs and
the war in Iran,
and the war in Iran that's driven gas prices through the roof,
and everything else.
On the state side, we have the gas tax that, while it's not the state gas tax's fault that the war in Iran happened, it's still almost 50 cents a gallon that people are paying for every gallon that they pump on top.
The sales tax
even
on
the
top.
sales tax on top of it. Property taxes that are completely out of control, and energy prices that are completely out of control. And it feels to me like leaders, like the legislature, like the governor himself, aren't meeting the moment in actually addressing affordability. It's, hey, look, we'll give you a couple of bucks off of your school supplies.
Some of your school supplies.
Some of your school supplies, fair. or well, CJ's doing great. Or well, we've got to pay for roads when we've got $7 billion in our road fund. Are those the three first things that have to be addressed? Can they be addressed, and how would they be addressed?
Yeah, it's obviously, you can stop me anytime because it's your podcast, because I could go on. That's a very weighty question, and I could probably go on for way too long.
It's the important one, so I think we're here to talk about it.
And yes, they absolutely can be addressed, but this is where you see the challenges and the limitations of the two-party system, because with each of those issues that you mentioned, there are special interest groups that need to be kept happy. If you're a politician in office, or in J.B. Pritzker's case, a politician with very big aspirations. And so to keep them happy, you then can't do certain things. And then those things end up becoming the impediments to actually making progress on this issue. Even though you mentioned gas prices, let's start there. The gas tax absolutely should have been suspended. As you noted, there's over $7 billion in the road and construction funds, which covers over a year of the budget for road construction and for infrastructure. The tollway has plenty of money in their budget, and yet here we're seeing toll increases, let alone not seeing a gas tax suspension or decrease or what have you.
A toll increase nobody asked for.
Right, yeah. Well, nobody other than a certain specific special interest group that they needed that to cut a deal on transit. So this is where politics constantly comes into play, where you've got these politicians who need the next check or the door knockers for their next election to get reelected, and so they've got to make certain decisions. And that's where being an independent becomes such a benefit. I always get that question, how would you govern as if you were to win as governor, being an independent, not having a party? And that's actually the superpower of this. That is the major benefit. Because being an independent, number one, I don't answer to any party bosses. I don't answer to special interests. And two, I can actually work with both parties. Best idea wins. And if you look at my socials, even in my podcast interviews this week, I've promoted a number of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who have had really good ideas. That's what I get to do as an independent that you can't do as a Republican or a Democrat. And so whether it's on gas prices and trying to find a way to reduce costs, what we're proposing there is putting a cap on the sales tax on our gas. I would love to eliminate it, but there was a deal cut a year ago that pushes that towards transit now. So it's locked into something. So as much as I'd love to cut it, you just can't right now. But we'll work towards being able to do that. But in the meantime, what we can do is cap it. Because right now, you saw J.B. Pritzker call on big oil to return their record profits because of the war in Iran, which I think is something worth talking about. But what JB didn't bring up is that the state of Illinois brought in record revenues from the sales tax on gas, and he's not talking at all about returning that to the voters, which is ridiculously hypocritical, so I called them out on it, and I'm doing it here too. That we have got to, number one, actually help working families, and number two, stop letting politics stand in the way of doing the right thing.
Let's talk about property taxes,
yes,
then, because that's killing numerous homeowners in this state, especially in suburbs where it's just eating away in families' budgets. And both of the major party candidates seem to not have a serious plan. Pritzker's plan is no plan at all, right?
It's blame everybody else.
It's locals need to figure this out, even though it's all run through state law.
Which he did it again on Monday.
And Darren Bailey's plan is to cap at 1%, which I don't think is even feasible under PTEL. If I understand it right, a little complicated. Sounds good on paper, but also hard to implement.
Actually impossible to implement.
How do you fix the property tax system? Obviously not a day one thing, but there has to be a long-term strategy.
Yeah. So first of all, it is absolutely unacceptable that J.B. Pritzker is blaming everyone but himself for this. He has a hand in this with unfunded mandates, with refusing to pass reforms at the state level, and with underfunding LGDF, underfunding our schools. The state absolutely has a hand in this, but I just point to how weak does that make you seem, and how weak does that make you? If you're the governor of Illinois and for every issue that pops up, you're like, oh, it's not me. That's the weakest leadership I've ever seen, and shame on J.B. Pritzker for that. On Darren Bailey's side, it's equally shame on him for lying to voters. You cannot. First of all, he doesn't have the power, wouldn't have the power as governor. You can't actually just snap your fingers and put a 1% property tax cap in. And if you did, if somehow magically he had the power, you'd end up telling all these local governments, you've got to slash half roughly of your expenditures? That means half your teachers gone, half your police officers gone, half your firefighters gone. No one actually supports that. Now, what I will agree to is that we can work towards a 1% property tax cap. That's a laudable goal, but in my best estimates, talking to budget experts, local experts, property tax experts, it's going to take at least a decade to get there. Here's the steps. We can drill down on any of them that you'd like, but I'm trying to do this fast. The steps, number one, stop putting more unfunded mandates on local governments. Just last year alone, there were 44 more unfunded mandates put on local governments, and local governments have no choice then but to raise property taxes to meet that. 1 year, 44 of them. I mean, we've got to stop that, and ideally put in place a committee, an organization, a something, kind of like the idea that Kirk Dillard had back in the day. Let's create a Department of Efficiency, but not maybe Department of Doge or Government Efficiency. I think he called it something else. But the idea was to find these unfunded mandates, find these regulations that aren't needed anymore. Let's eliminate them. So that's number one. You can start reducing costs on local governments. Number two, we absolutely need to find a way to fully fund LGDF, to fully fund our schools. We've got to pay down our pension debt, and that only happens with fiscal responsibility. And we've got a plan over the next decade to, at first, we're going to freeze spending, and then we're going to put in place discretionary spending. Then we're going to put in place common sense accountability measures so that we can see what spending is making sense and actually helping working families, what spending is not. That's going to allow you in year 2 and beyond to make smart decisions about where tax dollars are going. And then we're not going to make things worse by further sweetening tier 2 pensions. We do need to address safe harbor, but beyond that, we don't have the money for more than that. And then we've got bonds rolling off in 2030, 2033. We've got opportunities over this next decade where if we can get our spending under control and then over time start to invest that money into pensions, LGDF, education. Those are the 3 things we've got to invest in. It's not sexy. This isn't going to go in a TV ad. This isn't going to get you reelected, but we can get our state more fiscally responsible, and then that's going to, those funds going down to local governments. I want to then tie that to a program that rewards local governments for then passing that money down to their property taxpayers as property tax savings. And so you're incentivizing local governments. Listen, we'll get you more money, but then you got to give at least a major portion of that to your property taxpayers. You can't just shove that in your budget and spend it.
But realistically, right, to shift the burden of property to school funding away from property tax, it's going to have to come from somewhere else, which is most likely GRF.
Yep.
And you know, as much as you want to freeze discretionary spending and where you might find some cuts, we're talking billions.
Yeah.
Here is if we're shifting billions into GRF, doesn't that just automatically call for a tax increase?
Not a tax increase, it talks for modernizing the sales tax. So right now we've got a sales tax that still...
So a service tax, you're for a service tax?
In specific cases, for high-end services, not for everyday essentials, but there's absolutely a way here to modernize that sales tax where you reduce it on those regressive items that everybody absolutely needs. But then yes, you institute it on services so that it's not a tax that's regressively hitting lower income to middle income families so much. And there's a way to do this. A lot of policy shops have come up with different ways, different plans to do this, where you can help working families, but then yes, you can result in more revenue coming in. But what I have found is when I talk to business owners, when I talk to those people who pay the larger tax bills in this state, these are people who their biggest frustration is that they're not getting anything for those taxes. If you can show them that we actually have a plan to get the state growing again, to get the budget under control, to get property taxes under control, these are people who will happily, they've told me, they will happily sign up for a long-term deal where they know they're actually getting something for their large investments into government at the state. Energy prices are at the top of many people's minds. It feels like it maybe hasn't been as bad this summer as it was last summer for those of us that have opened our energy bills, but still not up, great. Still not great. 10%, 12%, 15% increases. Yep. But is this fully a CJIP problem? Or is this, as the governor likes to say, a market problem, a MISO, a PJM problem? I think there's because energy itself is very complicated. So there's never a situation where you can just say, fix this one thing and it fixes it. There are so many things that go into what has created this problem. And yes, some of the policies that have put forward down in Springfield that have moved us too quickly to our clean energy future bear some of the blame here. I wouldn't put all of it on there, but there have been decisions along the way that haven't been smart. For instance, closing down natural gas plants too quickly and leaning so hard into renewables that haven't been ready to meet that moment yet. I'm a big fan of wind and solar. Yes, we need battery, especially for peak times. Those are things we need to implement, but you look at a state like Texas and others that have implemented more of an all of the above approach, and they've been able to keep their energy prices more in check than we have, but still even theirs have gone up. And so you need more of that long-term all of the above approach. And yes, under CEJA, even before that, you've got FEJA, and then SERJA after that. They like all the JAs, I guess. And there have been some decisions made that you didn't have all the stakeholders around the table. They were decisions made where you kept environmentalists happy, which I respect as somebody who considers himself an environmentalist as well, but you've got to do it reasonably, and here's why. By shutting down natural gas plants, which burn so much more cleanly than coal plants, we're reaching rapidly. We're almost there where we're going to start importing energy instead of exporting energy. What energy are we importing? We're importing dirty coal energy into the state. So we closed natural gas plants that are cleaner in order to import dirty energy from other states that don't have the same environmental regulations as Illinois does. And so we've got to do this smarter if you actually care about the environment, which I do. You've got to do this in a more balanced way instead of a way where you can pat yourself on the back and go, look, we helped, when actually you hurt the problem more.
We saw last week that the speaker came out essentially in support of $150 million for Chicago public schools at the behest of the Chicago Teachers Union.
And then backed off it like 24 hours
sort
later.
of backed off of it since then, but there's still a push for state money, additional state money, either for CPS or for schools writ large. The State Board of Education has said that EBF, evidence-based funding, is not meeting its goals. Yep. Schools are not adequately funded. It comes back to where are you going to find the money for all of these things?
Yeah, so first of all, I've been on the front lines of this, working with school districts, and I've worked with some of the lowest funded school districts throughout the state. And so you can have two things be true at the same time. You can say that we spend a lot of money on education, because we do, but then you can also see these districts that are trying to get by with 60% adequacy, 65%, 70% adequacy, and they don't have the money to do any of the things that they want to do. And yes, as a result, test scores are held back, kids are held back. That should never happen. Your zip code should not decide the quality of education that you receive. But then also true is that the city of Chicago, CPS, spends more per student, well more per student than the state average, let alone the national average. And so again, two things can be true at the same time. What I want to do is make sure that our school districts are adequately funded, especially throughout the suburbs and the rural areas where we've got school districts that are working with way less than what Chicago has to work with per student. There is still work to be done here. But as you said, it's going to take time to find that money. And that's where, going back to our property tax portion of this conversation, the idea is to get the state more fiscally responsible. You've seen spending explode under J.B. Pritzker, and yes, a lot of that was during COVID, but the graph continued, the line continued going up at the same pace even after COVID has been done. And so we've got to get that back under control and then stop spending on shiny objects when the basics need to be addressed. And one of those basics is school funding, and you put that funding through EBF to make sure the funding is going into those districts that desperately need that funding.
Pension payment makes up a fifth of GRF spending, at least this year, and it's been about that level in recent years. There are some unions who want to clean up Tier 2 with some issues. There are other unions, teachers unions specifically, that want to get rid of Tier 2, go back to Tier 1. They want everything in a pony to go with it. Yep. When we're already crushed under pension debt, and the ramp is picking up. It's going to get to the rate that they want it to, but it's still going to take a decade plus. Is there a way to reduce the pension problem in the short term to free up some money in GRF?
Yeah, first of all, you got to stop digging a hole. And so this idea that we're going to add more sweeteners to Tier 2 is not a smart play right now. And by the way, even J.B. Pritzker said it when some of the unions came out and said that the Tier 2 pensions are holding back our ability to hire in the state. I and many others said, wait a second. Pritzker literally, a week or two before that, announced that we had record hiring in the state of Illinois. So that's not actually accurate. And then JB came out and echoed that point. And so this idea that Tier 2 is holding us back from being able to hire is not accurate. Now, let me say, I've always been a supporter of our unions, of our teachers. I want them to be very well paid, and I've proven that over the years. But you also have to be smart with your finances. So we can't make the problem worse. And we certainly, until our pensions are under control, cannot add sweeteners to it, other than needing to deal with the safe harbor problem, which is currently just being handled year to year in the budget. We could do something officially to handle that if it just takes it off the table. And then over time, what we are seeing is that as we're making those pension payments, it's becoming a smaller percentage of our budget already because of inflation and other factors. And so you are seeing it already become less of a challenge on the budget, which is why I say don't make it worse. I also point to that those bonds rolling off in 30 and 33. Those are opportunities to take that money and dedicate it specifically to paying down our debts. And so I would take a portion of that and put it towards our pension payments to start reducing that debt. And I'd also look at what else can we do when it comes to choice. The Constitution has been very clear that you cannot diminish benefits. And so I'm not going to sit here and say there's some magic fairy tale answer that we can just snap our fingers. You're going to get that from the Bailey campaign, not from me. What I'm going to do is live in reality. And within reality, we have seen some programs put forward. You've got choice programs. Batnick, I know, pushed that. I know Cullerton has pushed versions of that. Those can be expanded, and I'd like to know from pension experts, is there more we can do in that space where you give people a choice on what they want to do with their money? And what you're going to find is that many people are going to choose to do what they want with their money, which then takes that burden off of the state. And so I'd like to expand that. It's not going to make massive differences in our huge pension liability, but every change we can make that saves us a little bit each year, that compounds over the years. And so we've just got to keep working at this, but there's no silver bullet to this problem. And anybody who tells you it is simply just trying to lie to you to get a vote.
Legislature is a strange beast. You have divisions in each caucus. There are Democrats who want to, get spending in check. There are Democrats who want to spend everything they can get and more. There are Republicans who want to blow state government up. There are Republicans in the legislature who want to split the state into two, for God's sakes. How does a governor, and it's clear that Governor Pritzker's position is mostly let's just work with the Democrats because they're in the supermajority, and hardly work with Republicans. Rauner was essentially the same way. He didn't really want to work with Democrats. He just wanted to fight with everybody. Is there a path? Is there a magic potion to unite all these vastly different umbrellas in state government?
Yeah, honestly, this sounds self-serving, but I'm a candidate, so I need to be self-serving. It's what we're doing. It's this word, independent. That is what solves this. This idea of running as a third party, go elect 100 new people, and maybe that changes things. Republicans trying to elect 40 more of us and 20 more of us and a couple more statewide, which doesn't happen in politics, and then things might change. I genuinely believe part of our whole strategy here is that you can change things simply by creating a new space in our politics that brings the middle together. The reason why that is so transformational in our politics is because we're then connected to everyday people. There was a shift when it came to lobbying and influencing lawmakers about a decade and a half ago, where people realized that a lobbyist sitting across from a lawmaker telling him, I want you to vote for my bill, wasn't working anymore. And so people realized you had to do grassroots government affairs. Go home in their district and find people and get those people to put pressure on the lawmaker. That's how you actually make change on a bill, how you get someone to change their mind on a bill. Our whole movement is built on that whole concept of I'm going to be the one, our organization, our movement's going to be the one that's actually connected to everyday people. And so when you want to say that, listen, we've got this group over here who wants to do this and this group over here who wants to do that, we're the only ones out there actually talking to regular people and representing them. And that in politics is the true power. When you have the voice of the people, that's how you get things done. And when we represent that 47%, almost a majority, but certainly almost double each of the political parties, and we bring their voice to the process, it's get on board or get steamrolled, because ultimately the voters have said they want things better. They want things fixed. And they're sick and tired of two political parties who don't give them what they've asked for. We actually can.
As we sit here and record this on August 12th, there hasn't been a ton of cash coming in to your campaign, other than some personal money. When you first got into the race, someone close to your campaign told me that you had $1 million in commitments. Where's that money? Is it going to come through? Can you run a serious campaign without it?
Yeah, I can tell you that we still have significant commitments, and that number still is valid in terms of commitments. But I'll also be transparent that there's a lot of people who don't want to be first on something like this. I can tell you from experience how difficult it is to step out and take this risk, and the attacks that I get on an hourly basis as a result. And so many of those donors who were really excited by the promise of this and they still love the idea of this, are also like, well, I don't want to be first. And so we're waiting for those people or that person who's willing to cut the first big check. If that happens, you're going to see a whole bunch of other big checks that are going to come in behind it, because there's a lot of people who want to see this work, but there's a lot of people also who are worried about the risk. So we could get to November and have raised gobs of money. We could get to November and have raised not much more than we've already raised. We're going to find out. But in the meantime, we are actively out there campaigning. I am at events. We're doing podcasts. We're talking to voters. We're doing socials. And we've seen a whole lot of people who are interested in what we're doing. We're going to keep talking to voters. And the important thing is, unlike the other two campaigns where those candidates have to have high name ID because you need candidates to select them, I'm not running where Colin is what's important. I'm running where independent is what's important. And so the more we have conversations about how broken our politics is, and people see crazy people even outside of Illinois who get nominated by one party or the other and just throw their hands up and say, forget it, when they go to vote, there's going to be Pritzker, Bailey, and independent. Those are going to be those three choices, and you're going to see a heck of a lot of people choose something different when they vote.
But if you look at I haven't looked at the poly market kind of things in a few weeks, but last time I checked, it was like 92-8 Pritzker to Bailey. You were hardly even listed, right? The reality is that you are unlikely to win this race. So what does this movement mean? What happens after November 3rd?
Yeah, first of all, people have to remember we only officially got on the ballot like a month ago. So of course people don't know who we are. We had to start our campaign based on the ridiculous ballot access laws in the state. We had to start our campaign during the summer when nobody pays attention to politics. I've run over 850 campaigns, and most of those clients took the summer off because nobody pays attention to politics. And that's where we had to start our campaign. So let's see what kind of traction we get when you get to September and people are actually paying attention. Then we can see whether or not this thing actually has legs. But the important thing you brought up is that this is not a vanity project by Collin Corbett and Carolyn Schofield. This is not a one-time thing. This is the first step in a long-term independent movement that we're building in Illinois and beyond based on the meetings and conversations that I'm having. And so this is just step one. And that's where when you look at what we can achieve by November 3rd, that shows the beginnings of what we can then build in Illinois as we start to be an entity that people trust, as we continue to provide that alternative, and as we continue to provide solutions to the problems that Illinoisans face, because they're not getting that out of the two political parties. They're getting talking points, as we saw just last week. They're getting, back and forth, you're a racist, you're a jackass. That's all they're getting out of the two political parties. What they're going to continue getting out of us is mainstream common sense and actual policies that will make people's lives better. We're going to keep doing that well beyond November, and I know a lot of people are going to be excited because every independent I've talked to who's been elected, it's been a double tap situation. You run the first time, people say, I love it, but how's that going to work? And then election day hits and they go, oh, that was actually better than I thought. And then the second time around, they all line up and you win. So we're in this for the long haul. We're going to build this long term.
Colin Corbett, independent candidate for governor. Colin, thanks for the time.
Thanks for being here.
All right, that's the show for this week. We'll be at the State Fair next week. If we see you, hope we can toast a corn dog and lemon shake-up. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time on the Illinoize podcast.